Okay. Well, thanks for coming today. I'm John Lewis. I'll be your moderator for this session. Welcome to, let me share my screen. Here we go. Welcome to this first session, the International Institute for Knowledge and Innovation series called The Blindsided Enterprise. And the focus for today's session is called New Thinking. And our speakers will be Dr. Art Murray, presenting on the enterprise of the future, followed by Dr. Annie Green, presenting on a digital enterprise. Okay. Let's see. If you have any questions, please enter them in the chat window. And the second hour will be dedicated to questions and discussion. Before we kick off, I wanted to give the floor just a minute here to Annie Green, our program director for this series. Annie?
Hi. I want to say thanks to all. I see some familiar faces, so thank you for supporting the effort. And I wanted to just give some insight into the title, The Blindsided Enterprise. This was based on the fact that sometimes things are not visible to us. And so this is an opportunity to try to make some of those things visible as we take our journey into the digital world and knowledge management. So I hope you will enjoy this and tell others about it and come back to hear us over the next, series of the events. This goes out to November 30th. And in the end, we have an all conversation led by John Hubble. So welcome, thank you, and let's enjoy.
Great. Thank you, Annie. And now let me introduce our first speaker. For over 40 years, Dr. Art Murray's passion has been getting people to draw out their deeply hidden knowledge and make it available so they and others can benefit from it and also grow it. He's done this for hundreds of organizations around the world in a variety of industries, including defense, law enforcement, higher ed, energy, finance, public health, and government. His current focus is on building and curating digital bodies of knowledge, human and machine knowledge governance, and developing systems in which humans teach machines and machines teach humans, including a system for detecting and responding to weak signals in large, complex projects and organizations. For added insights, check out Art's books on human, deep learning, and the enterprise of the future, and his bi-monthly series called The Future of the Future at kmworld.com. Art, the stage is yours.
All right, thank you, John, and away we go. Well, good, great to have everyone here. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And let's get started. We're talking about the enterprise of the future to kick this off. And one of the things we're going to be doing is giving you, the audience, a chance to participate. There are two ways, as John already mentioned. You can enter in any comments, thoughts, insights, or questions into the chat box at any time. So we invite you to please do that. And the second thing is, you will see in each of our presentations, we include some polling. So we'd like to get sort of take the pulse of the audience. And so we're going to have a couple of questions that we'll start off each presentation with, and we invite your participation in that. It's an anonymous poll, but you'll see if everything works well, you'll see those poll results pop up on the screen live and in real time. So anyway, our first thought, our first topic under this first session, our inaugural kickoff meeting called New Thinking. And I'm going to talk to you about the enterprise of the future, all under this rubric of the blindsided enterprise. And I'll also, at the end, give you an introduction into the other speakers and how they all tie together. But for our enterprise of the future, one thing we always get asked, and it's a good question each of us should continually ask ourselves, is number one, why transform? That actually used to be why change, and it's even more than change. It's transformation. We've got to be continually transforming, but and that's going to be the message. But before we even get into that, we should understand why. Why do we need to change or transform? And then, okay, given the fact that, okay, yeah, the status quo won't do, if you accept that, then your next question will very likely be transform into what? And we're going to take a few, look at some ideas in that regard. And then the third part is how to make the transformation happen. And I'll share with you a lot of the work that we have done in our own company and in our institute, the IIKI, sponsor of this series, and a lot of the research we've done there into what works and what doesn't work in building this enterprise of the future, a continuously changing, transforming enterprise. Right. So that's basically 1, 2, 3 items we're going to go through. So let's start off, kick things off. Be curious. On a scale of 1 to 10, how fast is your business environment changing? All right. 1, at the low end, in your business environment, in other words, the ecosystem in which you operate, you and your organization. 1 means there's no change at all. And 10, it's the other extreme. It's constantly changing and crazy and very chaotic. So John, you're going to moderate yes, so there we go. John has popped up the polling. And so you should be able to enter in your answer. And as you see, as people answer, the results of that poll are coming in. All right. And so
Okay. Lock
in
'em
terms
in.
of, yeah, go ahead, John.
Yep. So we're ready to end the poll and show results.
Oh, all right. It's cool. You get to see the live results coming in. Okay, so what's the end result? All right, so 6 seems to be nobody said below below 5, so it's 5 to 9, and so the median here seems to be a scale on a scale of 1 to 10, around a 6. So yeah, things are changing, not extreme, not super slow, but they are changing. How's that look? Okay, all right. So that begs a follow-up question. Let me pop this up. Next question. On a scale of 1 to 10, now how fast are you changing? We looked at the outside environment. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how fast are you changing? And I'm going to make that mean you, meaning you as a person, a professional in your milieu. Again, you're not changing at all as a 1. You're constantly changing is a 10. So please, if you'll go to John's survey and start filling that out. And this looks like a pretty good group. There are no laggards here. Very good. Based on the results I see coming in. People are pretty good in responding to the changes that are happening outside. All right, John, I'll let you, whenever you're ready, give everybody else a chance to respond, and we'll see what the final result is.
Okay.
And again, looks like we're clustered between a 6 and an 8, 6, 7, and 8. So good. People are catching up. All right. So one more question, and that would be obvious question. Given the environment is changing, your business world is changing, and you're changing, okay? With respect to the changes in your environment, do you feel you're falling behind? Do you believe you're catching up, keeping pace, or leading the charge? Okay, so I don't think too many people are falling behind, but we'll see. I don't want to put the answer in your mouth, but where do you fit on that spectrum? Do you feel you're falling behind with respect to all the changes, catching up, keeping pace, or leading the charge?
Okay.
All right. Okay, so again, we have a very good group. Normally, I get a lot more people in the falling behind and catching up part. This group, I know we know each other, and we're kind of engaged in this work. So I guess it makes sense that we see that a lot of you are at least keeping pace, and some are leading the charge, some are catching up. Anyway, the session we're going to present to you here will help everybody. If you need to catch up, this will certainly give you ideas and ways you can do that. If you're just keeping pace, maybe we'll give you some ideas to move ahead and actually start taking charge in some areas. And if you are ahead of of the game, how to stay ahead, of course, is just as important. So I think this will be relevant to all of you. Okay, so very good. Thank you for your participation in that survey. It's good to kind of take the pulse of where everybody is. All right, so let's move on then. So why transform? The first question we had in our outline. Okay, obviously things that are happening, speed is one thing. The speed of change keeps accelerating. And along with speed, its favorite companion, complexity. The world is becoming more and more complex all the time at ever increasing speeds. And one good illustration of this is called the 5 V's of information. You know, information is coming at us in many different ways. And so does anybody know what the 5 V's are? Okay, we'll go through those. And this is a little handy dandy worksheet. You might want to just use this to take notes with respect. We're going to go through each of the 5 V's, and for those same questions, for each of those 5 V's, are you falling behind, catching up, keeping pace, or leading the charge? The first V is, as you might guess, volume, the volume of information. You know, we say we're drowning in information, starved for knowledge. So volume is the first V. Are you falling behind, catching up, keeping pace, or leading the charge? Just to kind of set the table and make some notes of this for yourself. So kind of calibrate of where you are with respect to these 5 V's. The second V is velocity, right? So if volume's increasing at greater acceleration, greater speeds, all this information is coming at us. Are we able to catch up, or are we staying ahead of the game? Then a wide variety, of course, especially it not only just the volume, but all kinds of information. How do I ferret out which is the information I need? A lot of it is junk, correct? As you know, a lot of it's disinformation. So that's a huge challenge. The variety of all this volume coming at us at high speeds. Then the veracity, as I mentioned, disinformation. All right. So how do we determine a big challenge now with the information we're being bombarded with is, hey, what's real and what isn't? What is the source? What is the provenance for this information? That's a huge challenge. Where are you on this spectrum of falling behind to leading the charge? And then finally, what you would expect the 5th V to be, value, right? Because again, so much, the 80-20 rule at the very least, and probably 90-10 rule, okay? 20% of all that information may be of value to you. How do you ferret that out? How do you suss out which is the most valuable information? So this is part of what's driving you to change. If you're, wherever you are on this chart and this little worksheet, that's going to help inform you as to where you need to focus your transformation efforts. Okay, so far so good. Okay, let's keep going. So those 5 V's, have a certain impact of your organization, and we're going to list a couple more transformations, changes that are going on and driving you to change. And then again, this is just a handy dandy worksheet. You can do this on a plain sheet of paper just for yourself. The 5 V's, what is the impact? High, medium, low? And then when we fill this out, then you'll get to rank all of them sort of as an exercise to see where should you focus on, because you can't do everything. Okay, 5 V's, number 1. Number 2, AI-based automation of knowledge worker activities. That is a big, huge change that is happening and will continue to happen over the next 5 years. We're seeing more and more workers being displaced by AI and automation. So how is that impacting you? It may be not for your organization, maybe in a big way. So just make a note of that. Okay, that's another change. And we're not going to go through all the changes. It's just a quick laundry list, and you can probably think of some changes yourself. Here's a good one that we see impacting quite a lot, and that is what we call technology-driven, socially amplified decision consequences. And what that mouthful means is, You have to be careful, so careful now. You think the microphone is off and it's on, and then the comment you made now is going viral. Okay. An email gets leaked out, that goes viral because everything is so technology woven and interconnected. The tiniest little seemingly insignificant decisions or remarks we make can be amplified, and sometimes in an amazing way, and it can cause a business to take off from some silly little slogan, and everybody grabs a hold of it, and your business takes up, or it's taken the wrong way, and everything goes south, right? Technology-driven, socially amplified decision consequences, okay? Minimizing the trust footprint is what we use to refer to that same notion of the term before. You hear about leaks, right? And so one of the things to think about is how transparent are you? Because we have found the less transparency there is in an organization, the more susceptible they are to leaks. And when those leaks do happen, then you have that technology amplification, all right? So think about, what is your trust footprint? Is it wide and large? Which means you have a lot of people who are doing decision-making behind closed doors and in the dark, such that you are exposed if something leaks out? Or are you keeping yourself open and transparent, which is probably the safest way to go? Good question to think about. Human technology integration, that's sort of along the AI part. More and more sensors are being embedded into humans. So is that a trend that's going to be affecting your enterprise? And IoT, right? In Internet of Things, we're now up to 100 billion devices with 8 billion minds on the planet. How on earth is that going? And that is definitely going to change the name of the game. We'll see an example about Africa, and I call Africa the last billion minds. They're coming online now, as long with a lot of other countries that have not had a seat at the table before are suddenly making an impact. All right, so that's a huge change. How is your enterprise going to deal with all of these new minds and devices coming onto the internet and onto the marketplace? And broad systemic point solutions versus point solutions, everything being connected. You can no longer, and you see this happens a lot in government, where there's a quick edict issued, and you say, okay, we're going to change this, boom, 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 and then they don't think about the implications and the ripple effect through other things that are affected. So we need to be thinking more in a systemic level than plain old point solutions. All right. And then I'll leave this out to anybody in the chat. This is just a laundry list. I would welcome anybody in the chat to enter any other change or trend is driving change in your enterprise. Please feel free to enter that. Okay, we'll take or think about that and enter that when you think of it, and we'll take a look at that later on. I want to keep moving though. So that was those are all the changes. Speed and increasing complexity. All right. Economic resilience is an example. And then how do we put our arms around, how do we wrap our arms around this complexity thing? And how do we connect the dots? And there's a new technology that's emerging and becoming quite popular called knowledge graphs. The Brain just released their version 13, The Brain. So just go to thebrain.com. It's one that we use. And we had a project at the Institute a while back for economic resilience. How do you build economic resilience from, catastrophes occur, whether it be war, natural disasters, pandemics, sort of knocks you for a loop. What is your capacity to bounce back quickly and maybe even better than you were before? And so we broke down all the elements that contribute to economic resistance. And you'll see some of the usual suspects here, like transportation and logistics. We hear a lot right now about the logistics chain and the supply chain being upset. And you see there are all kinds of avenues for that. So energy is another area ripe for disruption. Finance, okay, it's all there. So you, for your organization, should map out something like this using a tool like the Brain or a knowledge graph generating tool so that you can see the lay of the land. Now, you think that's the picture? Not by a long shot, because there are a lot of interdependencies. And when we add interdependencies, here's what our knowledge graph ends up looking like, all right? And that's only the second level. I haven't even gone to the third and fourth levels. So the point here is you need to be taking a survey of the landscape that you're operating in and how are things interconnected and what backups do you have. So if one of these nodes goes down, what's your second backup and how quickly can you bring that second backup node online so that you can continue your operations? Okay, so there's that thought. All right, let's keep going. There's the notion of clock speed that I think is important for us. And that was brought about by Charlie Fine at the MIT Sloan School. And here's what we mean by that. We have our enterprise, all right? People, relationships, the work environment. We have our tangible and intangible assets. And a lot of you are from the innovation and knowledge management community. You know what we mean by tangible and intangible assets and the infrastructure to enable all that, usually technology infrastructure. We're taking inputs into our enterprise, capital of various resources, both financial capital, human capital, resources, all the raw materials of the knowledge economy, and we're putting out products and services that deliver improved performance. So there's our enterprise. But key to this is the fact that in the essence of what we're all about is innovation and learning. There is a cycle of innovation and learning, a continuous cycle that should be going on. And we're going to go deep into this in later sessions in the coming weeks. But this is just to give you a flavor. There's this cycle of innovation and learning that must be going on. And the total of where I take these inputs, innovate and learn from them, and then deliver those outputs, that's my enterprise clock speed. And going back to those first questions we asked at the beginning, how does your enterprise clock speed, your ability to innovate and learn, how does that compare to changes, the speed of change in your industry? That's something you need to be mindful of and aware of and should be focused on. And so another quick thought question, you can just do this, think about this and put your answers on a sheet of paper. And I would like also to think about this even more in depth, and we're going to have after the first hour, we'll open the floor to questions and discussion. So I really welcome your thoughts, and we'd be happy to discuss some of your challenges. So anyway, think about here, maybe write down on a sheet of paper with respect to your enterprise, what's driving your industry's clock speed, what is slowing down your clock speed, or what's impeding your ability to keep up with the clock speed of your industry. And then think about what will help speed things up on the innovation side and on the learning side. You know, in the world of KM, where a lot of us are from, the focus is on learning, okay, capturing lessons learned, and that's all good and wonderful. But we often neglect innovation, and these two have got to be in play. So here's again, just on a blank sheet of paper, maybe put your thoughts down regarding these questions. And definitely let's talk about them during the Q&A period and the discussion period that'll follow this first hour. Okay, moving on. Another thing to think about is what are your critical decision points? You have to make decisions at the strategic, the tactical, and operational levels. So it's good for you to be thinking about, okay, where are the key critical decisions across my enterprise up and down? So again, just as a worksheet on a blank sheet of paper, think about these. Maybe what's your top strategic decision that you have to be making on a regular basis, and then the tactics, translating that strategy into tactics, and down at the operational level, down in the trenches, the day-to-day decisions. Where are there any of those absolutely critical? And again, a simple decision could result in getting going viral on the internet and either boosting you or crashing you. All right. So this is again the kind of thinking you need to be doing regarding your decision-making processes and the decisions you make. Okay, so far so good. I'm going to keep going here. In terms of metrics, everybody's talking about metrics. We have found, because of this whole backdrop of speed and complexity, we kind of fall back to 4 that settle around decisions, because again, a lot of our performance depends on decisions. So how long does it take us to make decisions? We want to drop that. We want to decrease the time to decision, but we want to make sure the quality of our decisions go up. We don't want to sacrifice quality. We don't want to make poor by rushing to decision too quickly, making a poor decision. We don't want that. We want to be able to reduce the time, but increase the quality, which therefore reduces the cost overall. We have less rework because of poor quality, and we have, with the less time, we put in less effort, which reduces our costs and increases our throughput, our capacity for decision, which needs to increase if we're constantly being bombarded with all these changes, the 5 V's and the other changes we mentioned. Okay, so that's just 4 handy dandy metrics that should always be a part of your KPIs, your performance measures as you're going through this and as you're continually evaluating your enterprise. Okay, so now transform into what? What does this enterprise of the future look like? Co-creating, delivering extraordinary value. In our institute, we have come up with 4 pillars. Annie has a book out on those 4 pillars based on their doctoral research of our doctoral students who have gone on and gotten their doctorates. And there were 4 pillars. It was called leadership, organization, learning, and technology. Okay, leadership, organization, learning, and technology. And we've kind of changed those. The leader side, co-creating in new business ecosystems, and you'll get handouts of this so that you can see all of these points. But I'm just laying out the framework here for you. On the leadership side, everybody has to embody their core values, live and breathe your core values, be able to anticipate what's going on in that rapidly changing world, making the right business decisions, and then being able to adapt your strategy. That's the leading side, okay? And being able to execute in an agile fashion. So the processes that help us do that agile execution, that's how we organize, all right? Value co-creation, business model innovation. See, innovation doesn't unnecessarily include products, right? We should be looking at our business models, our delivery models, innovate in those areas as well. Innovation in those areas is just as important. Streamlining embedded decision processes and those performance drivers like we just mentioned, okay? That's the organization side, creating and co-creating and delivering extraordinary value. The learning side, we've been focused on in our KM world, our KM groups, on lessons learned. Yes, sure, that's rearview mirror looking, but we need to go forward, right? What is our life fulfilling work that we do, and how do we apply systems thinking and constantly looking ahead and discovering new knowledge? Then enabled by, of course, the technology and infrastructure architecture. How are we aware, self-aware, resilient networks, value networks are something that I think most of you know, and of constantly evolving enterprise architecture and total systems integration, not silos, but how do we stitch everything together? All right, that's a quick overview. Again, you'll get this as a handout and links to even more details you can drill down, but that's a snapshot of the framework that we have built over multiple doctoral dissertations and university research. Okay, some quick examples. Number 1, what do all the following have in common? A royal engagement announcement, Madonna's reinvention tour, fresh Namibian fish, the scorching Kalahari Desert, and Zaragoza, Spain. Believe it or not, they all have something in common, and you can read about it right here at this article. And the common denominator is Zara, all right? In Zaragoza, Spain, there's a company called Zara, and the people of Zaragoza, Spain love fish. They love fresh fish. They hate frozen fish. If any of you have been to Spain, you know that's to be true. And one of their favorites is off the Namibian coast. But the trawlers have to catch that fish if it's to be fresh, get it across the scorching Kalahari Desert to an airport where it can go to Zaragoza. But meanwhile, in Zaragoza, Zara has been taking royal engagements and Madonna's reinvention tours and creating products that, what Madonna wore during her tour, they quickly, in 3 weeks' time, put out a wardrobe to match Madonna's wardrobe. And it sold like crazy. Ditto for the royal engagement. The princess to be was wearing a certain outfit. Zara copied that outfit, and boom, again quickly. Now a lot of that, how does that relate to the Kalahari Desert? Well, fish is going out, but also there's space available, cargo space available on those flights. Zara uses mohair from the desert and from the desert animals as part of their ingredients in making their wardrobe. So you see, smart companies like Zara are able to connect seemingly unconnected dots. That's one example. Another one, what do all these have in common? Global water crisis, the Netherlands, bank fraud detection, golf tournaments, and smart cities. Well, here we go. The World Trade Center here in our area, the Dulles Airport, got a call from the Netherlands saying, hey, we need to locate technologies to handle this water crisis that's going on. The World Trade Center identified somebody who was involved in bank fraud detection and called them and say, hey, can you help us? And sure enough, they were connected to a piece of software that entered that request, water management. Okay, so that got entered. They drilled down and discovered a company that makes waterless toilets. But okay, that may sound uninteresting, except this software is also able, as you see here on the map, identify all the places all across the globe that were looking for water management and waterless toilets. So this company that was in the Netherlands was able to not only just solve one problem, but able to extend their market offering across the globe. So there's another example. And yeah, what does it have to do with golf? Well, this software came up with what they call a leaderboard, okay, just like you're having a golf tournament. So, and again, that's another example, right, of how to connect the dots, increase market potential by being smart. That's smart stuff, seemingly unconnected, unrelated things. All right, that wraps up the enterprise of the future. With the about 1 or 2 more minutes, I want to before we go over to Annie and the second part of this session, I want to start with the whole theme here is, again, leading the blind sighted enterprise. And this session, what we're in right now, is called New Thinking. And you just heard a very quick overview of our work on the enterprise of the future, right? And like I say, you'll be getting the briefing slides available to you, so you can get to see those additional details. And Annie's coming up next with a digital enterprise, talking about sense making and what she calls a bountiful decision-making harvest. So that's going to be today, and then we'll allow about an hour for discussion and all your questions. And we really look forward to an interactive discussion and a great session, exchange of ideas. Okay, so that's today. 2 weeks from now, we're going to have session 2, Barriers to Change. And that we have 2 speakers. We've got Dr. Victoria Grady, who's going to talk about her book, Stuck, and the important things of making a choice, making connection, and then bridging. And Steve Hausman, who's here on the line with us today, Dr. Steve Hausman, is going to, he's a technology specialist and always keeping an eye on what are the latest trends and how can we benefit, and even what we should watch for. And he's going to talk about things like deep fake AI and technology that's becoming available to just about anybody. And what are the implications of that for society? That's going to be a powerful one. You don't want to miss this session. And then, so that's session 2. Our third session in 4 weeks' time. So session 2 is 2 weeks from now. 4 weeks from now, Dr. William Halal, our Institute co-founder, he's been doing tremendous work on the next stage in our evolution of consciousness. We're so interconnected. There's sort of a consciousness forming, a global consciousness that we've never really experienced before. He's been diving deep into that and will share his research results with you, including how it is dramatically changing the whole notion of the corporation and what it means and how it works. So that's another one you're not going to want to miss. And then to wrap it up, Dr. John Lewis, our host for today, is going to give you, I think, a great model for making this change happen. I gave you the quick rough view. He's going to walk you through 6 steps and that are actionable ways for you to make this transition real in your organizations and on a sustainable basis. Hey, finally, and in 6 weeks' time, we'll have everyone's going to come back. All our speakers are going to come back. We hope you will too. And we'll have a wrap up, a conversation facilitated by none other than Mr. John Havel, who his area of expertise and research is on having valuable conversations. All right. So with that, let me just wrap up by saying, no, this change isn't easy. It's a crazy world. It's getting more chaotic. It ain't easy, but we need to change the old mindsets. The old mindsets are not working. So whenever people say, stop, that'll never work here, no, you have to say, step up and say, no, we need to say, how can we make this work? So thank you very much. Go forth and transform. We'll leave this, again, you'll have the handouts. We've got additional resources for you to check, including books and our regular series in KM World called The Future of the Future. You should go through that if you haven't already. A lot of great insights there. So with that, I will stop sharing and turn the program back over to John. Take it away, John.
Wow, thanks, Art, for the presentation and also for kicking this series off and summarizing how all these pieces are coming together. So I hope that everyone that's here today is also registered for the upcoming sessions. So with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker today. Annie Green is a thought leader, professor, lecturer, speaker, journal reviewer, author, systems engineer, and strategist architect. She sees the big picture and can provide a holistic solution to the cognitive enterprise. Her purpose is to help organizations think and learn by providing pathways to architect data structures that support strategic formulation of evidence-based interventions, which are aligned with effective and efficient operations of today's enterprises. These structures facilitate leadership and management's ability to develop and monitor strategic plans using business intelligence and knowledge to improve the overall health and performance of their business enterprise. Annie, the stage is yours. Okay, and please unmute. Annie, have you unmuted?
Yes, I'm
There we
unmuted
go.
now.
Thank you. All right.
Okay. Bringing this up. Okay, I'm narrowing my focus down to art was at the global level, so to speak. I'm bringing this down to a enterprise level, which within our environment and our society, we have several levels of abstraction. My agenda is going to be I'm going to put a poll question for it just to kind of gauge the audience, but then I'm going to talk about some of our old history of how we did scientific management, organizational development, some of the downfalls. And then I'll step through, and you've seen some words like intangible assets and cognition, but I'm also going to introduce the social aspect of it because I'm going to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion so that we can see how that is playing a major factor into how we're actually establishing our structures that give us decision-making potential. And then I also want to introduce change management, another area that significantly impacts our success on bringing to fruition or bringing to full execution what we're putting into place to be able to think better within our organizations. Little shared thoughts and then put another poll question out there. So the first poll question is, does your organization align their strategy with the intangible assets within an organization? And, it's either yes, maybe, or you don't know, because sometimes the terminology is not familiar. But I'm hoping that once you go through this process or through this presentation, you'll understand this terminology a little bit better. Here we go. Wow, okay. Interesting. We got them across the spectrum. We have yes being the dominant one. So most people say they do align them with the intangible assets, and maybe, and then a few don't knows. That's interesting. So I hope after this that this generates some questions that we can be talking about later on in the sessions or after this presentation occurs. So, why is my pen screen not moving? Oh, there we go. Okay. Now, this is just a slight history. Scientific management was always based on making things equal for people, even though later on it winded up in bureaucracy, which was an excessive amount of tasks to perform things. But the thought behind it was that it would make it equal, so people would have the same tools, the same knowledge, and they would be able to produce at the same rate. Unfortunately, that did not necessarily work. It became more of a hindrance to their work than it did a benefit. But later, when we moved into organizational development and they did things such as the Hawthorne studies, which actually identified that, you know what, some people are more productive if you treat them like humans or treat them better. So we thought about how do you actually get the best out of individual workers as opposed to trying to make everybody a assembly line type of worker. And so when we look at this, the future of OD is very critical to us because it helps in complex environments, and we need to be able to understand the value that each person would bring into the organization and the position that they occupy. So when we look at that in today's enterprise, we require a mixture of both because as you've heard and you keep seeing, we need to look at the structure. We have processes. Unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, those processes are not clearly defined and have not been defined in years. And we also need the people who are critical to it because they are the ones that augment most of the machine types of processes that are going on. So we need to have things that are consistent so that people can actually understand and grow in them. And then we also need to recognize the differences in people so that we can come up with the best way of getting productivity and performance. Our organizations have evolved significantly, you know, especially from the industrial age. And I know that we say, a lot of people say we're going into the industrial industry 4.0. It's actually, if you see in this graphic, they've taken it to 5.0 now, where you have relationships. We went through a period where we did agile and break things down into small components so that we can actually fail early and move forward. But now we also need to look at those relationships that actually contribute toward our success. And in most cases, we look toward the value as opposed to just the activity itself. So when I start talking about this, my main emphasis in an organization is strategy because, you know, our organization strategies today should be able to negotiate change. That's our biggest thing. When we recognize something that isn't working or recognize something that's a better opportunity or even recognize something that's a problem, we should be able to look at it and negotiate and trade off what the value is if we do change. And we need things like diagnosis to be able to identify and assess improvements and problems. We need action planning so that we can determine and define interventions that, you know, are basically feasible and that by implementing them, they can be monitored and tracked for improvement. And we need these interventions that, again, that change and provide monitor progress and also commitment and buy-in. And this goes right back to it elevates the basis of trust, which is something that's also in the industry right now. Unless we have trust in what we're doing, then we tend to not be successful. You know, in the government, I think now military, there's zero trust. So they're starting out with zero trust and moving forward. So if we can actually improve the trust that we have in the tools and things that we're using and our strategies for interventions, then we would find that we would have better performance. And last but not least, we want to be able to evaluate because you don't just make a change and walk away from it. You make a change and you evaluate if it actually meets the goal that it's supposed to meet. So with all of that said, I'm taking you into that realm of we need to look at the value the people and their social periphery brings. That's where that social activities are coming in now, you know, because we're moving into the fifth industrial revolution and it's about people more so than it is about machines anymore. We have actually moved from the bronze to the brains and we can do things electronically that we could never do before. intangible assets are the path to our growth. And that is the things that we can't touch within an organization. We have to learn how to actually represent them so that we can monitor them. So, what is an organization's value? If you look at the chart, and here, tangibles versus intangibles. I'm sorry, I didn't put the reference on this, but I should have had a reference on this because it comes from several sources. But you look from 1975 to 2020, as like I said, we've evolved from the bronze to the brains. 90% of an organization is its value lies in intangible assets. And those intangible assets are things like innovation, relationships, expertise, and things that we really can't touch, but that we do need to define because we know that those are integral in how we actually perform. It's interesting, and I'll say this, an organization actually puts a lot into their tangible assets. They have a CFO and an entire structure that supports that. But when you step over in the other realm in intangible assets, a lot of organizations will have a CKO, but no structure that supports it. And that represents 90% of their value, yet financial only represents 10%. So I think we have to change the mindsets a little bit. So in a study out of MuleSoft and looking to see exactly how, what value do we need and how do we get this value? The answers were, and I'm just going to go through these briefly, but it was like technology, customer, business, which is like business processes, products and services, employees and partners. This is what they want to see, or this is where they think the value comes from. So, out of a study, this helps to support my work with my dissertation, which was I look at Michael Porter's value chain when we talk about balanced scorecards, and Altier's work on system methods, combining them. The value systems that I actually identified within that was customer, employee, partner, process, product, service, and technology. I think we all can understand that these are a great, and we'll move on to the next one, taxonomy to start with. But two areas that I actually added to those to make certain that we did internal and external was the competitor or the marketplace, and also information, because most people spend about 20 to 30% of their time every week looking for information to do their work, but never actually find it sometimes. So this FIVA model that identifies these value areas or the framework, it actually is the start of an enterprise taxonomy that can actually build an enterprise memory and also allow us to have visibility into our value area and our relationships based on how we establish a neural network. And that neural network drives behind machine learning, and it also will take you into deep learning, because if you have the layers properly of measurements, then you can actually cross-pollinate them so that you can not only identify structured data, you can also identify unstructured and also uncover innovation that exists. So the enterprise context, it decomposes to all organizational levels. And how do we start adding this in? You see where we have the organization. Remember, it goes down. You have people, processes, partners, products and services, whether it's a work product or a deliverable, technology that actually transposes down to every single area within your organization. So somehow or another, our structure must represent that so that we can actually go up against our organization structure, which leads us into organizational development. We need to represent these metrics and values. We need to identify them, like things like customer satisfaction,
Em mới thấy suy
employee,
chồng à? Em mới quay ở bên
employee satisfaction and such. Okay. So, what do we need? You've heard of this, and even through Gardner, a digital twin. I say a digital twin enterprise. We need to actually duplicate our real world enterprise into our data world so that we can understand the relationships. So this kind of clears up part of that. If intelligence as a human, because remember, we're duplicating we're putting thinking and everything into our enterprise. So if intelligence as a human being is based on the information we know and understand, and subsequently how we apply and disseminate this information for the betterment of ourselves and others, then let's transfer that to the enterprise. Then intelligence in the enterprise is based on the information that is known, understood, applied, and disseminated to sustain, improve, and renew the performance of the enterprise. So we have to think in that manner in order to be able to successfully put these structures in place. So mine is, let's change the current narrative. you've seen 100 times the triangle that takes you from data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. Okay. It's worked for however many years, but let's bridge the gap between information and knowledge to include relationships that provide thought and insight for the memory of an organization. And what you do there is you see the blue. We're all talking about artificial intelligence, but in our structure right now, we don't even have it represented. So what I've done is say, let's extend this narrative. Now we go from data to information, which is our information systems that support our systems. But here, let's develop a neural network the same as we do within the human structure, which is where that came from, so that we can then look at that intelligence and derive knowledge from it, because intelligence gives you proactive knowledge that you can move forward with and take action. And last but not least, we want to reach that cognition level where we're aware of things. Once we're aware of things, we know how to incorporate them into how we move forward. So this takes us to the cognitive enterprise system that I talk about, which also goes back to Senge, who tells you about mental models and making sense of things and decisions. So how do we build an enterprise system that actually takes us from data to cognition, and that we can represent the terms that are within it? Remember, we have a taxonomy now, and the taxonomy is pretty simple, starting with your employees, the partners that you bring in, the information that you need to process, the technology that you need to enable you. So you have all of those things kind of identified. And when we bring that into a foundation and we make it, we actually bring it into our reality. Our strategy is our brain, because it narrows it down to just the things that we need to put in place to be successful. And when we look in our organizations, the top of that is we need performance measurement, which tells us how we're doing. We need change management, because that identifies the change that is happening in an organization. And we need learning, because we don't want to change it unless we have determined that it is adding the value that it is supposed to add. So we have to take a period of learning to make certain that we're making the right decisions. We move to the area of mind. When you look within the human being, the mind is the colloidal effects that happen between that structure that takes you down to the body, of how you can use a hand, how you can use a leg, how, all of that comes from the way that our mind works throughout our body to then go back up to our brain. What we want to do is simulate that in knowledge management and business intelligence. So let's build a neural network that touches on all those spaces that we have. How does our employees relate with each other? How do our employees relate with our partners? How do our employees relate with our customers? So that's that neural network that we want, and that's the intelligence that we want to drive off of to get knowledge management. And then last but not least, this is where we operate. We have process management. It might not be very good, but process and procedures are critical to our knowledge of how our organizations work. And then we also have our information and application systems, which brings it into a structure of business. And at the bottom, we have data management, which is the raw data that we actually capture that represents what we need to know, that we drive into our information systems that actually get translated from technical to business. Now, on the side, other side, you see that I have culture and DEI, because we need to have that included to make certain that we are not building our biases into our system. I don't know if you read, but in the Washington Post recently, the city of Washington, D.C. has decided that they want to ban discriminatory algorithms, which is very interesting, because in order for them to have turned discriminatory, we must have taken the biases that we have in our people or our employees and placed them in our digital intelligence. And now we have a problem, because once you've placed them in the digital intelligence, that means that they have been institutionalized into your organization. And we've missed an opportunity where we could have eliminated it within the business structure and separated it from the individuals. This just gives, again, as you know, doing models in engineering, you try to represent things. So this just kind of represents that evolution again of changing the paradigm and going from data to cognition. Because what happens here is when we have knowledge, we can exploit the past, because where we are pulling information from history to try and make sense of it in different models. But we can also do forecasting, so we can look at, based on history, what we can anticipate in the future, and so we can do exploration. That gives us, again, looking back with and looking forward. Intelligence is proactive knowledge. That's why we want to incorporate that into that structure that we're following. If we do reactive, which is what we kind of do a lot of, knowledge is guess and gosh, and we want to get away from that. And that's because, everything is not absolute. It doesn't mean that it will be right if it's proactive, but most of the time the probability is much higher that it will be wrong if it's reactive. So let's transform an organization from data to cognition. And as you look at from management, operations to leadership as we go up the pike, again, these are terms that fit within the enterprise so that we better understand them. They already exist. We have data management. We need digital representation, which we don't talk about a lot in order for us to move over to the digital twin. We must take that data and represent it. We need a common business language. We have information systems or applications that we run that are domain specific. So again, we can then put it in context to the process because we need to tie it with the structure. We have artificial intelligence, which gives us actionable data that we can look at and run through change management before we actually make it knowledge, which is action driven, that we put it into place. And then we can look at learning to see how we can further improve that. And we have awareness. So now our interventions have a higher probability of being evidence-based and more accurate, and we can build our strategies off of that given a performance management system. So machine learning is the enterprise mind. This is where it actually fits in at strategy formulation. I'm not certain in a lot of organizations whether they actually formulate their strategy off of their intelligence within their systems or if they just gather the information from different reporting systems off of their information systems. Again, we cross-pollinate, which means that we put together these relationships so that we can see if there's any correlation between things that are happening. And we got to make this dynamic, internal and external analysis. We cannot wait and not know what's going on from day to day because knowledge changes very quickly. The value sources are placed in it and we can then roll them up. I'm going to go through the next slides pretty quickly. I know I have a lot of slides here, but I was trying to get the gist of it. But you see where the vital signs are, and we have boiled it up into relationship intelligence, competence intelligence, and structural intelligence. When you look at that, you begin to make sense of intangible assets by giving them names. For my customers, I want to know my acquisitions. I want to know how I'm driving my acquisitions. And then I want to know my satisfaction. I want to know longevity and profitability. There's a difference in those. Someone who's been around for a long time might not be your most profitable company or client, but you want to know those that are bringing in the significant amount of profit. When you look down at employees, you want to know their assignments and how they're working on their assignments. And you look at attributes about them like education, experience, and longevity. This will give you insights into how they will work in the environment that you have set up. You can see where they might work under different reporting relationships differently. There have been times that employees have been stellar working under one particular reporting relationship, and then they move to another, and you lose all of their contributions. So this makes it a little bit more visible to what the intangible assets are. Each one of those need to go into diagnostic measures like Peter Drucker has put forth. This has existed for quite some time. We need the foundation types which show cash flow. We need productivity so we can see performance. We need competence so that we can know the skill set of the people performing the work. Are they an expert? Are they a novice? Resource allocation information so that we know where we're placing people and we can know how much contribution they can make in the places that we're placing them. This gives you a view of it as well. When we say cross-pollinate, let me look at relationships again. How are my employees impacting each other? How are my employees impacting customer? How are my customers' relationship to my partners? How is the relationship of my customers to my competitors? These all help us get ahead. In competence, you want to know if your employee is knowledgeable about the information that they need, if your employee is knowledgeable about the process, because once again, these are the intangibles that help them to perform better. And then we get in structure. We want to know if the technology we're using is actually providing the value that we're expecting. So This gives you a wider view and it shows you how the further down you go, you get into deep learning. And again, you begin to cross pollinate these to a point where you can actually do correlations to see if there's innovation or new ideas within them. This gives you just a condensed view of that so that you can see when you're looking at the relationships between employee, you're looking at intimacy, so employee intimacy, customer intimacy. When you're looking at competence, you're looking at employee qualification, partner qualification. And you know, when I say partner, remember that a lot of organizations have contractors that are working as staff augmentation. So you want to know that they're quite qualified to get the work done that has been assigned as well. Structured intelligence, you want to again look at competitive integration. We have a lot of places, even customer, where customers now they actually sign into systems and they put information into those systems. It's happening in all industries, even in the medical field. They capture information before. You want to know if those systems are working and improving performance. Real quick, quality knowledge. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So you got to make certain that you're pulling the right measures and that you've sat down and thought about it and walked through these algorithms so that you understand what they're doing. The neural network structure, again, that's the intelligence. We need subcategories, we need algorithms, we need a common business language, and they need to turn out fact or evidence-based answers. And you need to, you know, like even with the financial part, you need to walk through these to see if the outcomes are what you're expecting from the information that you're putting in. I also want to caution you that artificial intelligence is used in products, process, and insights. So therefore, if it's used in a product and a product is used within your organization, then that also needs to be monitored in a way to see if it's contributing toward the performance of the organization. It's not just us putting the analytics there, but there are structured algorithms that you already know the outcome of that you build into some of these products. This is the overarching view of what is it. It's called My Artificial Enterprise. The artificial enterprise takes all of those layers again, goes from data to cognition when it's built and established properly. And this again takes us through the whole structure where we start with the organization layout. We go to the strategy and tangible assets. We move to the digital twin, which represents, the whole structure. We get to the digital mind where we've built these intangible assets that we have now represented them appropriately using the right parameters. And then we take them to the systems that actually give us what we're looking for, which is the artificial intelligence system and the knowledge management system. And I won't go through that. Cognition is awareness. I'll take you through. When we're designing these and diversity, equity, and inclusion, we need to make certain that we have taken into consideration the social aspect. You know, all people don't act the same and all people don't have the same mindset. And somehow or another, we need to think those through. It's even like with DC saying that they're going to do discriminatory algorithms. You have to think, we already know the characteristics of discrimination, but yet we don't think that we can capture it. You know, it's something as simple as a resume. When someone takes your high school graduation year and they do a calculation on it and they realize that you have a certain age, so they discard your resume. And that's age discrimination. So we know what's happening. It's just that we got to write the algorithms and be trustworthy with them that we're writing them correctly. Digital transfer, I'm going to come run through. So we want to put socialization into this. That's basically what that's saying. So we also want to build knowledge in the leadership, make certain that they understand the diversity, equity, and inclusion and how it should be incorporated within these algorithms so that we can then have the right people there who can evaluate them. So let's be ready. When we're ready for change, let's look at the 5 pillars of change, which is communication, sponsorship, stakeholder management, readiness, training, and transition. And we can use the PROSI methodology, which again is ADKAR, and I'm not going to go through all of them. Organizational change management. At the organization level, let's make certain that we have readiness first and that we think about things like cultural alignment, organization success and change initiatives, and above all, the human side of change. Because some people do not take change well, while others can change fairly quickly. But most people, if they're engaged in it and know what's coming, then they can handle change adequately. One thing I wanted to point out was, with the McKinsey study that might spark a thought, you have the return on investment was 143% when an excellent OCM program was part of an initiative, and 35% when there was a poor OCM program or no program. Okay, when you look at that, 143% ROI means that for every dollar spent on the project, the company is gaining 43 cents. On the other hand, a 35% return on investment means that for every dollar spent, they are losing 65%. So the value of having a change management program while we're going through this digital transformation and while we're seeking knowledge and intelligence is critical to our success. We need to change both mindsets, again, by engaging people and making certain that the enterprise is aware of how they engage people and the current mindset of its employees. I've already talked through culture. Just a few questions that might spark thought and get you thinking on it when we're doing a thinking digital enterprise. These algorithms, we need to ask the questions: what are algorithms? Why are they necessary? Who is responsible for their creation? When are they used? Where do they fit into AI? And how they are related to machine learning, and then are they ethical? And you need to also think that these algorithms are capturing the relationships and the mind of the organization. So therefore, you have to look at security and keep them under lock and key, because they could disclose information that you don't want disclosed. Applied thought, last one: digital transformation integrates digital technology. The same language must be spoken, because when we have multiple languages, it's going to cause confusion. We need to have a real world digital representation. And we need to have a critical path, again, that takes us through from data and evolves up through awareness. And we also need to, like with DEI, include the auxiliary processes that support the critical path to being success. So let's take a real quick poll question, and then we can jump to other questions and talk about this subject. And the question is, would you like to learn more about a digital enterprise? That's good. Yes. And someone don't know, might not be in the subject area. Very good. So, why does this always stick? So, I thank you for listening to that. I know I went pretty fast and it's quite a few slides, but I kind of need them to get the thought across. But you can contact me if you want to know more about a digital enterprise, and I can slow it down and ask pointed questions. We have a question and answer period right after this. And then at the end of this series, we do have a conversation. So I thank you for listening to me.
Wow. Thank you, Annie. That was great. And if you do have some questions, go ahead and type them into chat, please. A couple came into me directly. I can read those off, and if you could go ahead and put it in for everyone so we can see them if you do have additional questions. But I would like to kick this discussion off with a question for Art. One of the great things I think about, and the fun things about IIKI, is it's a group of people that pretty much have one foot in academia, keeping up with the latest concepts and ideas, and also though one foot in the practical world. And it's how we can bridge this together and not just talk about ideas that can't be implemented in the real world. So, Art, my first question, as I was looking at your slides, help us understand that when you were showing us all these dots and the need to connect dots, and that makes sense from an academic standpoint. But you were saying, okay, now we're just at level 2 and level 3, and so the question I had was like, practically, it seems like there's unlimited possible number of dots to connect, and it keeps new ones popping up. So talk about that picture you have of how that is it a practical tool that will be used in the enterprise, please?
Aha. Yeah, great question, John. Two thoughts on that. You mentioned IIKI. We have always had as our running theme from theory to practice. And that is very similar to the loop we saw in that enterprise diagram, innovation, learning. And but the thing that maybe differentiates us even more so as an institute is because we're grounded in university level research, which has to have a theory. A good example, a lot of what happens in management is trial and error. In other words, people just discover something. Oh, wow, look at this. We discovered this by accident. And then that gets spread out and people use it, but they lose the context. So a theory, a framework that underlies an innovation or an idea is important, because then when you test it, you can go back and modify that theory. The theory allows you to apply an innovation across a broader area of application. Does that make sense? Something that fits well in one realm or one discipline or one domain may not fit well in another, but it may only take a slight modification. And usually the clues to that modification are through the underlying theory. Okay, so that's what we've always made. And then we would have that feedback. We'd have the theory, try it out, see what comes back, modify the theory, send it out again, and then other people try it, and then more feedback comes back, and you have this continuous loop. So that's the first part. And then to go on to your question about what happens is that was just 2 layers deep, and we've gone many more layers in our work. We've discovered, by the way, it's pretty much a law. Once you get out to 7 and 8 layers of connections, everybody's connected to everything, and then it makes no sense. But you do have these threads that, just like the fish, the Namibian coast fish going across the Kalahari Desert and then picking up mohair along the way, and then which ends up being in a wardrobe line, a new clothing line that imitates some engagement of a royal family. Those are a lot of dots that aren't just 1 or 2 hops away. They're multiple hops away. So here's the secret sauce to doing that. And that is 3 things to keep in mind. Okay. Technology. And I mentioned knowledge graph technology. Graph databases are now really taking hold. And the reason is, obviously, the old relational databases are collapsing. And then we came through this era of big data, right? And we had Python and everything that allowed us to crunch massive databases. And we got insights from that. But still, there were limitations. Graph databases, which are built on graph theory and mathematics, allow you to build the query first, and it very quickly goes. It can go. We've had queries off of our graph databases that have gone 100 hops away, 200 hops away. All right. So number 1 is the technology, especially graph databases based on graph theory and knowledge graphs, allow you to take on the whole enchilada, all the dots interconnected. But boom, the flip side of that is human sense making. So now we get into this little discussion about what are the humans going to do when AI is telling you, is able to discover everything. Well, humans in our work have become very valuable in terms of sense making. So in other words, the machines can connect the dots, and you go, wow, does that make sense or not? And that's where the human sense making comes in. Humans and machines now. So again, to handle that, we call it the digital hairball. Okay, you create a digital hairball. The best way to handle that is let the computers do the crunching, and they can reveal things to the humans. The humans have the insight, the cognition that Annie talked about at length, to make sense out of it. And we can say either it makes sense or doesn't make sense. And we can feed that back to the machines. So the machines are teaching us by giving us revealing patterns that we might not have recognized, but we're teaching the machines in order to say, hey, these kinds of things make sense, these types of things make no sense at all. And the third component, if you can imagine the foundation underneath, the foundation under which all that lies, that's the theory. We call it deep structure. What are the, you build up, you have this digital hairball, this morass, this complexity that's going on in the world. That's all rapidly changing. There is a component, and I think Bill Halal is going to get to this in the third session. There is a non-changing component made up of foundational principles that are unchanging. That's where the foundational theory comes into play. And that's either non-changing or very slow changing. And so we want to make sure that everything we do at the dot connecting above in this cloud, this digital morass, has some connection to foundational core principles that are underlying all that. And when we can make that connection, when we can see the dots, when they make sense to us, and when they are grounded in sound, slow changing or unchanging principles, then we've got it. Does that kind of address your question, John? I know it's a long answer.
Yes, I think so, and I especially like the idea. I was getting a picture of how it's an interaction model between the AIs and humans. It's the algorithms and people, the sense making and the deep learning all happening at the same time in a cycle. The way you were describing it, it's not just two different things, or one hands off to the other and it's done.
Right.
So
It's
that's
essential.
yeah.
All those three have to be working in sync. That's essential. Otherwise, you get these band-aid solutions, or fragmented piecemeal solutions that are very brittle. They may solve one problem and actually create more problems downstream. So yeah, all of that, those three playing together are essential, and thinking at a systems level is critical, especially in this age of complexity and high speed.
Yeah, super. Thanks, Art. I wanted to just, we're getting some more questions starting to come in, but I just wanted to parallel this question with a similar question for Annie. And Annie, I know you probably have an entire semester course on this question, but it really makes a lot of sense to be focusing on intangible assets. But how can an enterprise value intangible assets? How would you answer that question?
They can easily value it. For example, if they're tracing or monitoring their employees, and they see that one of their employees has been on 5 projects that have been very successful. That's a correlation, right? And they see that the relationship with that employee and that customer, and again, this is some of it is for future forecasting, and that is excellent, and that they tend to come back because of that employee, and they like the work that they're doing. And then all of a sudden, that employee leaves, and that contract, which is a $15 million contract, goes belly up. That's value. So there are a lot of ways you could look at it and actually come up with either future funding, or come up with performance types of issues. But again, it's that you're going to have to sit down, think it through. You're going to have to bring in some economists to do econometrics, which is geared right toward intangible assets. And you're going to have to come up with those algorithms that make sense to what happens when you lose something that you're not aware of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I think Dr. Arrington had a question around DEI, but she's dropped off. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, I'm still here. Is it okay to ask the question now?
Yeah.
Oops. Better make sure you can hear me. All right. Well, let me say first, thanks, Dr. Annie and Dr. Art. I appreciate the information of the past, wealth of knowledge. I'm just so excited. Can't wait for the next session. So I'll be here. Already work, but I will be here. So my question is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is an executive order by the president where it's added accessibility. So, and this is, the product or services that can be used by everyone. Oftentimes there's a stigma of asking for reasonable accommodation or putting yourself out there, if you will, as needing accommodations. And whether the accessibility is cultural or digital technology or informational software, whatever barriers, and even neurodiversity, I guess my question is accessibility worthy of a discussion as it relates to digital transformation and what we're talking here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are privacy and confidentiality laws out there that are growing every day. And those, if you're doing a digital representation of a person within a system, then you want to make certain that that information is accurate. You also want to make certain that you protect their privacy and confidentiality of not disclosing any of that information. Now, within the realm, it's like within the government, the Freedom of Information Act only protects those within the government, so to speak. And so, the same way with these enterprises, if people are part of an enterprise, they have to be able to have access to the information in order to do their job. But, if you have built your structure out enough, then perhaps you can exclude them from information that they do not have a need or a right to know. But most organizations, the structure is not that way. To give you an example, like in retail, if somebody came in and they said, okay, I want to know what my last purchase was. And when they pull it up, they get their phone number, their address, and all of this other information just to tell them what their purchase is. And that's the way the information systems were built. So that would mean they would have to go back and change the structure of these systems to make certain that it's on a pertinent need to know. Now, I don't know how we could do that, but I know that right now I have a whole page and a half of of privacy and confidentiality laws and things that are occurring, including with them in international. So my answer to that would be absolutely, because if somebody's representing me, I want to know that they're representing me properly, and if they're giving my information out, I want to know that it's going to a source that needs it for a particular reason.
Thank you.
Anybody else on that one?
Great question.
Mhm.
Any other questions? I had one I wanted to go back to Art with. If you don't mind, Art, I think you have this really comprehensive framework, and I think that's definitely proven, as you say, backed by research, and again, it's sort of fine as an academic exercise. In the real world, how do we make it real? And what would you say the first step would be?
Yeah, good question. Because it's easy to get overwhelmed. Our frameworks that we develop, and I think both the Enterprise of Future framework, which evolved over a course of almost 2 decades, and Annie's frameworks that she showed you, they're very comprehensive. You've got to admit. So you raise a great question. You can't take on that whole enchilada at once. Where do you start? How do you make it real? And where do you start? I think that's what you're asking. And I always like to say, first of all, you have to know where you are and you have to know where you're going. I mean, that's very basic. And even in terms of knowing where you're going, it's amazing how many employees within companies cannot articulate their own organization's strategic objective or their one, strategic goal, or even the mission. What is the mission of your organization? So on the one hand, you start there. And if you can't articulate that mission, then that's a great place to start. Okay. Start to clarify, crystallize your goal, your mission and your goal. And then from that, your strategy for achieving that goal or achieving that mission. All right. So that's up at the target side. And then you have to know where you are. So where you are now. And then typically there's a gap. Because otherwise it's not a very good goal if you have already achieved it, right? So you're usually starting from somewhere. You have the goal, the strategic objective, that end goal, that end state in mind that you are aiming for. And then now it becomes, okay, what is the best way to close that gap? Now, that's where I like to view the work that Annie and I and you do. We have these frameworks. Look at those as toolkits, if you will. One of our co-founders, Mike Stankowski, always talked about a recipe. You've got your pantry has all these ingredients. So I'm going to get a pinch of this, a dash of that, a cup of this, and I'm going to mix it together and bake it and try baking it this way. And that's kind of what you're doing then. You've got a goal in mind. You're here. And now you start piecing together the steps toward achieving that goal. And you draw from all that complex framework that we have and, build it, maybe one bite at a time. And you can even do simpler than that. Amazon, for instance, they have a slogan called every day is like day one. Okay. They had it in their mind exactly what they want to be. And let's all aim toward every day aim toward achieving that goal. So that's probably one thing I can offer in terms of that, a simplified way of getting started on that, where you want to go, where you are, and start to finding out for yourself what step one is, what step two is toward closing that gap. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question, John?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Art. And anybody else want to jump in with a question?
Or a comment, feel free to chime in too if you have thoughts or insights. So we've got a smart group of audience here. I know we've got some good people here. So we welcome your comments and thoughts and insights as well.
So Candace has a comment. Go ahead.
Thanks very much. This has been very interesting. I actually found quite a few sort of nuggets across the presentation. So I found your feedback, your answer to John Art on the dots and the making sense and then grounding it, very interesting. So I'm working for a company in gender inclusion, and we're obviously at that point, obviously, where we've got a starting point and a goal. We don't quite know how to connect some of that. But what I found very interesting was just really at the beginning, you asked, are we keeping pace? And sort of where are some of the challenges in that? And I think we're very good at listening. So we have a remote company, a global company, and we have colleagues all over the world. And I think what we're very good at, and that's part of some of the role that I play, is we have these fantastic listening circles. We have great team calls, great sessions where we all sort of talk and share. We have a great IDEI program, and we're very sort of inclusive. We share a lot of learning, but we're not necessarily able to translate that into kind of a strategy. So I'm able to find all these dots, but we're not necessarily able to translate that into something. So we're busy working on a strategy, but it's a case of what to leave behind and what to take with you. So sometimes you can also be then maybe a little bit too inclusive, and it's kind of hard to find that balance sometimes. So I just find it very interesting in terms of being able to look at sort of what transformation means or what innovation means. It's not necessarily about being able to just sort of listen to all of these things. It's actually being able to about making that leap forward. And I also find it quite interesting about being grounded in some of these things, but actually being able to really make sense of that. So, it's not necessarily only about learning or only about listening. It's actually being able to move that forward and still being able to find that innovation, as well as being able to, as an organization, wanting to make some of that systemic change, specifically if you're talking about gender inclusion and really some of the big sort of social impacts that you want to make as an organization. So I think it's great to be in a community where you're actually wanting to make that change and not just sort of be part of a listening group. So I think it's also interesting that you're sort of talking about making the transformation and not just keeping pace. So that's just something I wanted to say that was really important and sort of timely about a series like this, and also about IIKI. So more of a comment from me, but thanks very much.
Oh, I like that comment, Candace. That's the goal. So you're saying we're meeting what we wanted to do.
Let me ask you a question, Candace, because I think, listening is important, and we haven't touched upon that very much. So it'd be good to get your thoughts on that. And my specific question is, because this gets into the work that we do in innovation and knowledge management, how important and how much attention do you pay during the listening to the language that's used? And I don't necessarily mean, Spanish, English, or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the words that people choose often can give you clues and insights. Do you make use of that? How much, and if so, how much, and what does that do for you?
It's really, really crucial. So it's quite interesting across the organization. We have, I would say, obviously a lot of specialists and very few generalists. So the specialists use very specific words. So if you start to pick up on some of those words, they're very action oriented, but in a very specific way, and obviously to very specific markets and to very specific audiences. And sometimes they are so specific that it's actually quite hard to action it out of there. And then also, if you take that very specific to what we do, it's almost in a sense, gender inclusion work can be quite common sense. So you're looking for innovation in something that's then almost a common sense solution. So it's quite hard to make that jump sometimes from the language you're using. You're wanting to make this great sort of leap, and you're looking sort of for systemic change, but the language you're using, and you're trying to get great action out of something that almost feels like it's quite normal or quite common sense. So the language is really, really crucial there. And as a generalist, you're picking up really, I would say, very nice words and very nice language, but they're not the sort of groundbreaking or sort of paradigm shifting words that you almost imagine to be associated with innovation. So the language in these sort of listening sessions are very crucial and very key, but sometimes you feel there's quite a mismatch with what you're trying to get out of a session like that. So you have to come at it with a very different mindset. And quite often the tone and the nuance of those sessions are very, very different to what you feel a great sort of innovation session should be. So you have to approach it very different. So the language in those sessions they're very telling, but sometimes you have to prepare the people who are expecting a great sort of outcome of one of these sessions to say, come at it with a different approach and listen carefully to what these sessions are telling you. So the language in these is very telling.
Oh, it's great. Great insights. Yeah, thank you, Candace. Yeah, that's something I think we don't pay anywhere near enough attention to as we should. Thank you.
Absolutely. Very interesting. Thanks.
Okay.
Great discussion. And the point of making it actionable, it's making me think about this framework that Annie was showing us, as far as saying, has DIKW really worked for us, and can we improve on it to make it actionable? And so, Annie, what are your thoughts on that? Can we, reach cognition? How can we do that? How can we move through and make this framework you're showing us actionable?
Well, the first thing, coming from a systems engineering perspective, we try to do everything at one time, and you can't do that. You have got to prioritize, and that's what the strategy is for. So, that model has to be tailored like anything else, because if you are in industry, you're competitive. So you're looking for a competitive advantage. If you are in other areas, you are mission effectiveness. Okay. So that means you're going to move certain things out of it. And you have to really think through your structure. So, like, for example, with one of the MIT course that I kind of attended and went to, it helped to solidify that if you want to improve your customers at this point, then start with your customers so that you draw it all the way out. And if you want to look at the relationship that comes, then maybe start with your customer and your employee. But pick and choose. At least I've given you a taxonomy of areas that you can start in and draw it out and then evolve it. And again, it all comes with funding. The cadence of a project is based on the resources that you put on it. So you've got to have the buy-in, the commitment, and here's where I think the disconnect is. Leadership has to understand it. Right now, I don't think they're understanding it. So you're not going to approve what you don't understand. So I think the first thing is we need to somehow or another get adjacent to leadership and convey this over to them so that they become a part of it. And then hopefully they'll start doing the numbers to see how they can separate this, not necessarily as research and development, but perhaps as knowledge and improvement, or innovation, and that they actually fund an area for that. Like I said within the presentation, intangibles represent 90% of the value of an organization. And somehow or another, even though they're doing constant surveys and all of this, I don't think it's being taken seriously. Because even digital transformation programs are failing at 70%. And even the 30% are struggling up the hill. So my thing is, how do you get this going? You've got to get leadership buy-in. We've got to get on the same sheet of music. We've got to speak the same language, and we got to move forward. It's not going to work if we don't. The other thing is, what drives me crazy is faddism, and also what would you call it? Everybody switches terms all the time, even though they're saying the same thing. We got to stabilize the language. We need for us to say the word and understand the word and then move forward. We spend a lot of time changing words so that everybody or different segments can understand what they are. Let's build a thesaurus, stick with the same word, and then add on the additional one so that there's a thesaurus for it. So it's doable, but right now, the biggest thing is the mindset. You've got to change the mindset. And we've got to move past the foundation. There are how many definitions of knowledge management? Pick one and move forward.
Yeah, super. And what you had me thinking about there is sort of change the mindset. And you were talking earlier about the mindset that people have and how that gets put into the algorithms that are codified for, let's say, looking at resumes as they come in and starting to affect, inclusion and questions like that. How would you codify diversity and inclusion into algorithms?
Again, it's you got to look at your reality. We know when discrimination occurs. Again, like with the age thing, if age doesn't matter, then why do we put the years in our resume? Take it out. Look at the experience and then bring them forward with the experience. So what is the purpose of the year?
You're saying if you say you are a certain level as qualified by certifications or something of an expert in something,
Mm-hmm.
it really doesn't matter what age you are, where you're from.
Absolutely.
So we should focus on those measurements and completely remove, when it gets to the decisioning point, those other indicators.
Yes, and those indicators should never be in our algorithms. It's even like you have got to also be concerned about the ones that you need to investigate. What is it? Kathy O'Neill has a really good book, The Weapons of Math Destruction. And Kathy Rondon has actually come out with a nice book that talks to it too, as We the People. Okay. Now, here's the thing. At a Georgetown presentation, we're sitting there, and one of the things that comes up is about resumes, or putting information in. So a lot of companies ask you the information that they want to get to know you. So they'll ask you things like, what type of music do you like? Okay. And when they take that, here's what happens. What type of music do you like? And if you select hip hop, then those who have developed it automatically assume that you're African American. So when you select hip hop and they see that on your application, guess what? It's thrown away. So all of those little personal things that you put on a resume that you're told to put on them, sometimes they are buttons that push discrimination. And we need to be aware of them. If it doesn't add value to your decision, it's noise. Take it out.
Yeah, that's making me think about all the dots that are being connected that Art's talking about, and at the same time saying, okay, we can connect all of these things, and some of them may be connected and be useful in good ways and not so good ways.
Absolutely. Well, that's
So
the neural network. That's why
yeah,
I use the term cross pollination. So you're cross pollinating them. If you have each one of those intangibles and you drill it down to an indicator, and beneath that indicator, you drill it down to measures and measurements that actually, produce value. That's where you get into the deep learning when you start to cross pollinate them and you start to identify correlations of things. Just like with the article, and we're talking DEI, like with Corona, I wrote an article because I was really at the point fed up where I said, I'm tired of hearing about these disparities. Let's fix it. We've had all these things going on, and you keep making the same announcement since 1918 that minorities are more susceptible to diseases because of underlying conditions. You've had 100 years to find out what those underlying conditions are because you know them and you've collected enough information, but yet you stay at the surface. And every time you represent it, you say it's because of underlying conditions. Let's go deeper. We keep talking deep learning, but nobody wants to go deeper because nobody wants to unveil the truth because they feel as though the truth will label them. And that's what I put in the article. These labels have got to stop, and we've got to stop. Here's knowledge management again. When we come back to knowledge management, we've got to stop penalizing for the truth. When we find the truth, let's start addressing it. It's like with the teachers when they did the study that the teachers, not minority teachers, but that they treated minority kids differently. So they did the study, they watched it, and a lot of the teachers were shocked at the results. Now, some of them were upset at it, but a lot of them were shocked at it. They found out that it was true, that for young minority kids, their expectations of them were lower. So when they would fail, they would go, oh, it's okay, no problem. But if the complimented kid failed, they would work with them and say, oh, you can do better. Come on, we'll do this, we'll lift you up. So that difference, because here's another intangible, the expectation. When you give a kid expectations, they actually live up to it. So you have schools like Steve Perry, who the principal gets up, meets the kids every day, brings them in, and now through the success of having expectations of them, they now have a 100% graduation rate, and these are all minority kids, and a 50% going on to Ivy League schools. So we have this data, we just aren't using it properly.
back to your point, it all comes back to mindset. You can have a growth mindset or you can have a fixed mindset
Mm-hmm.
as an individual. And a lot of times we talk about it that way, but you're giving a good example where that concept is basically institutionalized and
Mm-hmm.
put into the rule set of how we operate at organizational level.
Mm-hmm.
So, Art, I had a question for you because you were talking about the pace of change because right now we're still talking about just the complexity and the desire to have a transparency in the decision making. We can talk about that from an XAI standpoint where we can explain the AI's decisions, but we haven't really gotten good, as Annie's talking about it, just getting people and leadership to be transparent with their decisions. But on top of that, we have, to your point, a world that's changing faster and faster, and at the same time more complex with larger organizations. So to keep pace, because that's really what someone back to making this practical would want to know. How would you stay? One of the poll questions, like ahead of the game, basically. How would you say someone would approach staying ahead of the game on all of this?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. One in no particular order either. One thing that comes to mind is the work we do in anticipatory systems. So you've got the old way, which is always rear view mirror oriented, and then maybe we'd adjust. And that's still very valid. You should be watching it, what results have occurred in the past and how you can extrapolate forward. But that's not good enough anymore yet. There has to be some anticipation. And so coupled with anticipation, what may or may not happen, connected to that is agility. And remember, in that resilience matrix we had is very similar to agility. You have to be agile in order to be resilient because you got to be able to shift very quickly, reallocate resources very quickly, reprioritize quickly. So agile and the whole principles of agile definitely apply here. So anticipatory thinking, right? Looking beyond the horizon, not just your windshield versus the rear view mirror. You're looking through the windshield and thinking about what's over the hill. When you get over the hill, what's on the other side. And it may or may not turn out to be what you were thinking, but at least you're in anticipatory mode in your thinking. Then agile, the ability to quickly make adjustments as you approach the top of the hill and as you discover, whoa, something's totally different here as a storm, adjust quickly. And then the third part again is, what is unchanging? Knowing what your assets are at a foundational level, the things that are slow changing and non-changing. Because if you get caught up in the whirlwind, I think it's Stephen Covey called it the whirlwind. You get caught up in that, you go crazy because you're in the chaos. You got to step back from the chaos into that area of calmness. And I'm starting to sound a little bit Zen here, but it in principle, what are our core competencies? What are our core areas? What's foundational to our enterprise that will always be there? What's slow changing? And then how can we then bubble that up to what's going on the surface? And how can we posture our resources in anticipation of changes we may see coming, or even surprises, but knowing, and then here's the big thing, knowing what to reject. In other words, change can also be in the form of risk or opportunity, right? So very often enterprises make the mistake, just like the proverbial dog chasing the rabbits in the field. You're going after one rabbit, chase another rabbit, and never catch a rabbit. So it can be the same thing. The temptation is there. You see all these opportunities popping up. Go back to your core capability, right? The basis, and then see, is this something? And then you go back to that strategic thinking, that strategic decision making, clarity of mission. And that's always the thing that helps you. Clarity of mission. Is this in our wheelhouse or not? If it is, let's go. Can we allocate resources? What is the impact of that? And then you do that correlating, or you say, nope, we're not going to go chasing that rabbit. We're going to stay where we are. That's probably the best you can do in this world, but always keeping that thought process going on all the time. Does that help any?
Yeah. And actually, as you walk through those three, I'm always trying to find a way to remember things. It sounded like 3 A's to me, and I think the last A is alignment, and I would start with that first. Maybe it's like, is it something I even care about? Is the direction I want to go? And then making that decision and the things you talk through there, then I can look at how can I anticipate now in that on that road that I think I want to stay on, and then as I'm anticipating and still things come up, how agile can I be in responding to them? So I was kind of thinking of that model was coming to mind in that order from when you were talking through that. Does that align with what you're saying?
Yeah, and then action. Maybe the fourth one would be the final A. Then would be action. I've got to act accordingly. Okay. And the action could be no action, could be doing nothing. But still, it's the OODA loop, right? Decide, act. So the same kind of thought process you're talking about, but then at the end of that process, there's got to be an action of some sort that you take, and then you're going and you repeat the whole process, repeat that loop. So that's a good loop. Maybe let's copyright that or patent it or something.
The 4A loop brought forth today. Any other thoughts or questions? People still hanging on today? Got a few people.
Yeah. No other thoughts? Well, I'll tell you, this has been good. Candace, seeing you again is excellent. Dr. Arrington, Glenda, thank you for joining us. Salim, thank you for hanging around to the end. We got some really good comments in here. We're going to be sharing these out on the KMNG so that we can, spread them around. Candace, you're saying that we're moving toward the action. I would love if you would put that on LinkedIn as a comment to this series, okay? And if others enjoyed it, please, let people know that it is a very informative session and that it's we want to have that differentiation. Tell them, what we're doing different and how it might help them. Okay.
And Steve Hausman is here. He's been there quiet, but I know he's taking all of this in, and we're going to be hearing from him in 2 weeks' time, right, Steve?
Actually, I was
Abs-
thinking what you talking about useless information. Somebody asked me to review their LinkedIn profile one time, and under languages spoken, I noticed one that I was not really familiar with, and I looked it up. It turned out to be the language spoken in Game of Thrones. And I said, unless you've invented that language, I think you should remove it from your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, but it's amazing the way we've gotten so, I don't know, unorganized and destructured, and how we have made the abnormal normal.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that this series, again, the blindsided enterprise, there are things that are not visible to us, and that is the purpose of this. And we're hoping that after this series, that we'll be able to run another series, that we can identify these areas that we need to put a spotlight on, so that people begin to realize what will be happening in this digital transformation era. And it's given all of the pieces, because we got to integrate them. And like I said, let's change, let's change the narrative. We talk intelligence, we talk knowledge, we talk data, but let's bring them together so we see how they interact to get us to the ultimate goal, which is intangible asset valuation.
Great, great, great summary, Annie, and tying it back to our theme. Perfect. So with that, I think we're just about out of time. Any other final remarks, Art?
Nope, can't wait for the next one. And yeah, maybe let's also think about what to do in the next series. And I don't know, maybe Candace, you'd like to talk. Maybe we should just do some discussion about listening and language. That's a topic that has popped up during this discussion. Let's be attuned when we have I think the discussions, like when we go to conferences, it's always the discussions in the hallways. They're always sometimes even better than the presentations. And so I think we've had a very great discussion session here. And so, yeah, we've got some ideas, I think, that could actually be put to use in future.
Oh, I do. I think you're right. Think listening and language. Oh, those are two ones that are not visible.
So let's bookmark that. Candace, would you be up for joining us for something like that? Working with us in something like that?
Excellent. Fantastic. Definitely count me in.
All right. See, there we go. Okay,
Great.
good.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yay.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Excellent.
Thanks for that point, Art, that this is our kickoff series that we have scheduled so far, and we do plan to have more. So, if there's more ideas or people watching this recording with more ideas, jump in and let's keep these series going. Okay, with that, we're going to call it a day. Thanks for joining us today, and we will hopefully see you in 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.